Hello and welcome to the Wild Wild West podcast. My name is Richie Riche of the MHRT Network. Over that away is the real Alex Gibbons. You can catch his content over on Arrowhead Addict in the written section. And coming up ever so quickly, every week is 1 week closer, is the Lightning Fast Fantasy Podcast, which you can catch Alex and Coach Defense on the Lockdown Defense YouTube channel. Down directly below, Jack Kennett, thank you for representing your Las Vegas Raiders and giving us your insight. That is wonderful. Those of you who are in the chat, let's give Jack a round of applause for coming in.
Gentlemen.
We'll get more people in here to leave some comments here. I want to hear some feedback from all of you in terms of who you think is going to kind of end up in what place in the division. And I'd love to see some active participation as we inevitably get into a debate of sorts here on the show, and there will likely be many disagreements. But gentlemen, let's kick this thing off. Obviously, everyone is going to have their own opinions in terms of what fits and what doesn't, and what have you. Every team is going to match up differently against the other. And I think that last year is a reasonable initial jumping off point as we start comparing. I really think that the only team in the division, or there's two teams in the division that are going to be question marks, and that's going to be the Raiders and the Chargers. I believe the Raiders are going to have a different scheme with your new coach. He'll want to run something different than McDaniels did, and as he should. And the Chargers, obviously, with Harbaugh, is going to be a completely different team. And for those of you who don't know Harbaugh's typical trajectory as he comes into new teams, he generally has I don't want to call it a wash year, but a wash year of sorts where he identifies key talent pieces and identifies other pieces that don't fit what he wants to do. Or doesn't fit what he wants to do. He'll move on from those pieces in the offseason, and you typically won't see a Harbaugh team start to really look polished until year two, generally speaking. So it'll be very interesting to see kind of where the Raiders land with the new scheme and how you guys utilize your current players, who fits, who doesn't, and then also look at the Chargers for similar reasons. So with that in mind, I think since Jack is here to kind of go into some of those details, Jack, I'll throw over to you to discuss your Las Vegas Raiders, kind of where you see yourself sitting, why, what position groups you think are going to be, good, bad, indifferent, whatever the case you want to be, and just kind of go right into it.
Dude, so do you want to do this? Are we talking about overall just the rankings of the teams, or do you want to go into each position group and how we
gonna win the division or the order?
Oh, okay.
And then I think on top of that, you can kind of give your reason as to who you think's going to win and why, like in terms of certain areas and certain things. Like, so for example, you might say, I really think that this year the Raiders have made 2 or 3 solid acquisitions on the interior defensive side, and I believe that that's going to in turn level up our defense and kind of give the Chiefs fits or something like that. And that's how you go about it.
So I have, hate to say it, Alex, I have your Kansas City Chiefs winning it all, win the division. But I do see my Raiders slipping into the playoffs, and then we're going to cause havoc. So I see us as number 2, the Raiders number 2. Number 3, I have the Chargers, just because we had, Matt and Staley as the coach. And they've always had solid rosters, on paper, but, can they stay healthy? And Staley just, when you played against him, you just knew it was going to be bad coaching. I mean, literally one of the worst coaches in the league, and now getting Harbaugh, who's a tenured, been to a Super Bowl, won a national championship. He knows what he's doing. Yes. So then I have the Chargers. Sorry, Richie. got your Broncos coming in last. You know, it's not because of like you don't have a great head coach. You do, but you took a huge salary cap hit with Wilson, and you've given up so many draft picks where you can't replenish them, and so it's just going to take some time to restock the shelves per se. So Chiefs number 1, Raiders number 2, Chargers number 3, Broncos number 4, and part of the reason why I feel that way, we got it. One of the best defensive tackles from Miami to pair with Max Crosby to make that probably the most formidable defensive line in the AFC West. So that is definitely where you got to start with that. And then I like Tom Telesco coming over, and I don't have a pairing with the head coach and GM where the head coach is saying, hey, you need to take this guy. We got Telesco. So we just talked about the paper tigers, right? You know, on the Chargers. He drafted well. You can't control when guys get hurt or don't get hurt. So I've liked what he's done. I like what he did within this draft as well, too. So there's a couple of my points to why I think, you know, Raiders will finish up number 2 in the division, and hopefully there's enough wins for a playoff spot, and then anything can happen.
So a few things I disagree with your assessment of injuries and whatnot. There's going to be some injuries, which I agree with your comment there, which is, you know, like some of them are going to be fluke. Like you're playing a contact sport. It is what it is, you know. Yeah.
Okay. Agree with that. But with the Chargers, it's like every year. Both is out every year. Derwin James is out every year.
And it's like in non-contact things.
Right. So like, it becomes an issue where if it is 2, 3, 4, and 5 years in a row, over and over and over again, you start to end up with a recurring challenge and a recurring problem. And at some point that becomes whether or not it's nutrition that's being put in at the NFL facility, and that is landing on ownership and or head coaches' decisions on who they bring in and who they don't bring in terms of a nutritionist, other components. So that's certainly one option. And then the other one is, and I believe this is what you actually had in the Chargers case, they had a long-term guy that was sitting at their strength and conditioning coach who was just never let go and shown the door despite having year over year of injuries. And last year, the Chargers actually had one of their healthiest seasons that they've had in years last year, except for a few of the guys that have been injury prone. Obviously, we're injury prone again because, as my doctor told me when I broke my leg the first time, the most telling sign that someone is coming in here with a broken bone of some kind or whatever is that they broke it before. And it's because when you break bones and you shatter things and do that kind of stuff, you often end up weakening some of the soft tissue around where you damaged or where you broke it before. And you can then put yourself at risk of breaking and breakages and stuff again. And so you just have to be looking at everything from a holistic perspective. And then last but not least, Telesco drafted well in the earlier stages of the draft, generally speaking. And I will agree with you there. But the bulk of most rosters are actually built from kind of the round 8 to round 6, round 7 of the draft, as well as undrafted free agents. And for the most part, Telesco and his front office did not bring in guys that were overly successful in that portion of the draft. And
Agreed.
so you have to overcome those hurdles with Telesco. Now, you have a guy who's still on your on your coaching staff or in that front office who I believe can help him overcome that.
There is one. They retained from last year. So,
yeah. And so I think you have a yin and a yang there between Telesco and I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head.
I'm drawing a mental blank too.
Kelly, isn't it Champ?
Kelly.
Champ
Kelly. There you go. It's like I can picture his face. I just couldn't remember the name.
I'm not even a Raiders fan.
Yeah.
I love that. Alex knows.
Yeah. So
you know, like when someone else is good, you know that. I had to look up some of the players on some of your guys' teams. So
yeah, so I think Champ Kelly is a guy that is likely destined to be a GM within the next year or two for another team. And I think that's a pretty fair comment to make.
That is a fair assessment.
Yeah. And so I think that's going to probably happen. But he, for now, at this stage of the game, I believe will balance Telesco in terms of assessing and properly balancing that kind of round 3 to round 7 depth. Whereas Telesco was more of an early round, right? Like, whereas round 1, 2. So
Bishop, welcome.
Ed,
The doctor.
Bishop, how you doing?
Bishop.
Robert Pena. Salute all my Raider brothers and sisters in the house.
Yeah, we got a fair number of them that jumped in. Thank you for jumping in. Go ahead and click those like buttons on all those channels that you're coming in and joining us on. It helps us a great deal. Those of you who have typically wanted to join us on X, they have recently changed their rules.
Elon, dude.
And they are only allowing streaming for premium X accounts. So you're going to see.
That sounds dirty.
So I didn't say triple X accounts. I said X accounts.
X.
Yeah, and I think that what you're going to end up with is a fair number of folks that typically do podcasts are going to probably start dropping off of X in terms of basically broadcasting on there. However, I also think you're going to see a demand from those that are going to be streaming through X of features that have been, we'll call it long forgotten, including the flow through on platforms that allow you to stream to multiple social platforms to be functioning again, which they have not been working for the last almost 2.5 years. So that is an unacceptable outcome. However, I'm hoping that we will start seeing, we will start getting X rebroadcast shortly here on the show. However, as we look ahead, Jack, and kind of assess kind of some of the comments made there, as a Broncos fan, having had a whack of free agents being brought in that were meant to be fix-alls, my only kind of caveat, warning, just, obviously I have a tremendous amount of respect for the Raiders and the rivalry with the Broncos over the years. Be careful about some of the free agents you bring in.
We only brought one, really one free agent, and he's got the motor of like Max. So
sure, you can.
I think that's why they paid him that type of money.
Right, but there will be a fit piece as well. You look at some of the acquisitions over other teams. It is. You're right, Bishop.
It's
however,
on the precipice.
Yes, it is. I would just caution you just to look at the fit of the player and the rest of the folks on the roster. If the guy brought in is a me guy, then you run the risk of him perhaps not fitting with the rest of the roster and team and culture. In addition, you may have an injury issue as he transitions teams. That happens a fair amount. A lot of people kind of don't. Let's put it this way. If the dude is elite in that position group, it is very rare for a team to let a guy go unless they actually have some absolute knock it out of the park home run to back him up. At which point they're going to seek draft capital or simply just look to, free up that cap. So you just got to be careful with those sorts of things, in my opinion.
I agree. I can't disagree with that. That's well said, but it was last year, even one of the deepest positions on the team, and we let go of two guys in Tillery and Blah Nichols, and it's just as deep, if not more deep, this year. So it's the strongest position on the team. So if he went down, yes, that'd be a huge blow because he's a blue chipper. You only got so many blue chippers on any team. So yes, it'd be like losing Max would be, oh my God, unbelievable. Christian Wilkinson, unbelievable. But they have a lot of depth on that defensive front. So I know we haven't got to defense yet. So let's move on and let's talk about like who's going to win it, Who's coming second? Who's coming third? Who's coming fourth?
So right now, Jack, your prediction is Chiefs first, Raiders second, Chargers third, and Broncos fourth.
Yep. Sorry.
And so, despite the fact that there will likely be some roster shuffling as KC has to deal with NFL decisions coming down the pipe, which are inevitable. Like, it just is what it is. Alex, you're we've already said this on the show already.
Yeah. Just for Rasheed Rice. I mean, the other guy they dumped. They waved his ass a long time ago.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But there's still distractions within the locker room that occur from that, and it can cause, some challenges just because of that. Because you're going to have the media constantly saying, "What was it like in the offseason having so much negative press?" And
I don't know, though. I'd argue there was a fair amount of distractions last season between, drop balls, Taylor Swift, Kelsey growing popularity off of the field. I mean, there was a lot of stuff, but I mean, they still made it work, and apparently Patrick Mahomes didn't have fun. So, what that means for this season is
not having fun. Winning a Super Bowl.
He wants to do it.
Chiefs ticket prices must have went way up after Swifty. It's like shoot.
He's trolling. Oh yeah, well yeah, they tried to move the stadium or renovate, and Jackson County said nah. A little more into that, but yeah.
So I actually think that there's going to be some additional challenges. For example, I think you're going to have
that's going to happen at some point, Anna. It's just her track record, and then we're going to get some sweet song about it.
It'll be something like fumble on the 20. Or
I predict she's gonna change into it's gonna be as like a rap genre song, and she's gonna call him a bitch the whole time, and people are gonna be like, "What is this?"
Yeah.
Oh, Anna, that's funny.
Yeah. And I'm sure it'll be an album, and it'll be 87 except written backwards or something as an intention of a intentional diss track of some kind. But anyways, I think that's what you're going to see coming out of that. Although they've certainly lasted longer than they would typically normally last in such a public high stakes relationship like that. So you never know. You just never know.
Yeah. It's weird, and it's crazy. Even watching the receiver show, they had to show that she was there. I'm like, God, everywhere. Like, why we got to do this?
Right. So, Jack, I don't know if you can see the chat. There is a debate right now in terms of.
I think we've got a live betting odds on this.
Yes. Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah.
I've seen the chat, but I think I'm only seeing Captain Jack's chat. So.
Oh yes. So there's a debate right now that's happening in terms of what you're smoking.
Oh no, it's just cigarettes.
Right.
I saw that. It's not weed.
Yeah, there's
devil's lettuce.
Yeah.
Smell it.
This is the chat that's on the screen right now is the second.
Some reefer.
Yeah.
Get out of here, Dewey.
So and of course Stephen A. Smith's iconic meme at this point comes to mind. But I think that the KC is going to have some, obviously the expectation and real kind of looming cloud there of saying, can you three-peat? That's a big deal. A nice problem to have, but a big deal nonetheless. Right?
Wish I had that problem.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not. It really sucks.
Yeah. And then
I feel for you, Alex.
I do. Where Jack lives, that ain't.
It's
no
California.
Thing.
I mean, yeah.
That ain't just no thing.
California is legal, but it's not. It's not weed.
Yeah. And so I think. So I actually have your team winning the division, Alex. Still, I have you at number 1.
Very good.
I have the Raiders. I I have it as a toss-up actually between the Raiders and the Broncos finishing second, and I think it's going to come down to one of those last games. When you look at kind of where the schedule, like there's that gauntlet that happens at the end, where the AFC West inevitably plays each other. DZ, I said earlier in the show, and I've given my reasons for it. I'm happy to say it again. I think the Chargers are. I'm not going to call them in a rebuild mode, because I don't think that's fair, because I think the Chargers have a better roster than to call it a rebuild. However, I do think the Chargers are in a refresh mode to get players to bring in to fit what your new head coach is looking for. And like it or not, that's going to take longer than one offseason. And on top of that, in all fairness, it ain't good.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah,
Retool.
Richie, I don't know. It's a toss-up. I don't know. 8 wins in a row. We're going to work on 10 wins going this year. I just don't know.
Well, hey, Chiefs hadn't lost to them since before TikTok was made, and that happened last year. So.
Yeah,
anything can happen.
It's any given Sunday. That's true. That is a fact. That's what I love about this show,
especially on Monday night.
Yeah, and I also think that what you're seeing from the Broncos rebuild is it's not guys you expect, but it's a grittier style player, which is more akin to what the Broncos used to be. So, like if you remember how the Broncos used to play, kind of under Pat Bowlen when he was the owner, and it was kind of solidified, they were always in it. They were never always in the Super Bowl, for example, but they were always in the playoffs, like first, second round. They always had reasonable players, but not a ton of them were household names outside of Denver. With rare exceptions. You had like Rod Smith, and you had some of the other guys that were obviously Elway and others that kind of were
Trace Amigos back in the day.
Right, exactly. But so I mean, there's exceptions, but generally speaking, the Broncos were a little bit more akin to, I would say, kind of what New England was when they were kind of going through that dynasty era there, where not one player was kind of, except for Tom Brady, for example, was that vaunted household name. It was everyone just kind of worked together as a cohesive unit, and they typically did well.
So savage. Oh, that's good.
or on IR.
Actually, Mile High Salute, you're wrong. The Chargers are actually known for folding like cheap tents at halftime. It's the other way around. They're normally there early on, and they're finished way too early. There's a joke in there somewhere.
Yeah, it's up to you to find it.
Yeah, but that's what you end up getting typically with. I
feel the sarcasm in that one.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's what you get when you're not here. Your team gets bashed a little more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's typically what ends up happening with the Chargers is they typically end up with a lead up front. You look at what happened with when Manning was here and he had that kind of 24, 26 point, 27 point comeback victory against the Chargers. That's not an uncommon thing. That's happened several times at the Chargers where they've ended up not kind of coming out the gate properly at halftime. And that occurred under multiple coaching regimes. So that is something that is obviously, broader than just one coaching regime.
And I think that, Harbaugh is going to correct a lot of that, though, too. So it'll be interesting to see. We don't have Madden, playing the game anymore. Going like fourth down, 8 or 9 times in a game. So we're going to have some more. We're going to see more consistent play with the Chargers for sure.
I mean, and you do have to kind of put some weight to what I think DZ said in the chat earlier. I mean, Harbaugh's first year with the 49ers, well, he took a 6-10 team and they went 13-3 to the NFC Championship game. So I mean, he definitely has the skill set to get guys to play the way he wants to and buy in. I think but I haven't gone through like fine tooth look at 49ers roster at that time compared to the Chargers now, I think there might be a little bit more holes, so to speak, in the Chargers roster now. But I mean, you're talking about a great coach with a great track record, pairing him with a great QB. Like I think there's a lot to be excited about. And, you kind of have to agree that's a retooling because I think they don't really know, what they have yet. And they're kind of like using this year to say, hey, maybe he goes 13-3 and we're like, oh, we only need to like really, fix a couple things. Or maybe we can kind of identify the guys that aren't going to fit what we're trying to do and then use this next offseason to fully, invest in that.
Yeah, totally, to just try to get the culture going, to fit that culture. I kind of see like the Keenan Allen thing was like not a culture fit. So I think that's why Keenan's won.
Yeah, and I think honestly they looked at it as, which guys are expendable. We're not eating a bunch of like dead cap, and we can get some draft capital so I can go get the guys I want to start my, regime with. And I mean, I think we saw plenty of reports that if Mack and Bosa weren't playing ball on reworking their deals, they would have been gone too. So, I think that's why you kind of call it more of a retool than a rebuild, because they didn't lose those guys. And if they're healthy, I mean, Mack I think he led the league in sacks last year, was right up there.
17.
And you got it. I mean, this is kind of this has literally got to be a make or break a year for Joey Bosa. I mean, and you got to think a guy that sees his brother get a bunch of money and be successful and stay healthy, maybe something will click with him this year. And I mean, if that does, like, Chargers are kind of an unknown for me as to like what type of team they will be.
It's an interesting choice of words, Alex. You used two phrases there. It's a make or break year with Bosa. Well, he has been broken much of his career.
Yeah.
And that is, like I said, interesting choice of words. And in addition to that, when you say clicking, the only clicking I think that's coming from Bosa right now is from his shoulder and knee, which keep on getting hurt.
And the clicking of the Bud Light seltzer.
Yeah. Working out all the arthritis. That's
more seltzer. The mango one.
Yeah. And the sad part about the Bosa brothers is that they basically start arguing over which fruity drink they're gonna have between.
They're weird guys, man. Like I want to be a fly on the wall for like the Bosa family Thanksgiving, just to see like what kind of conversations they have, because it doesn't seem like either one really has any sort of personality, and they're just like literally breathe football.
Yeah, they're kind of like straight faced.
Like in that receiver show, like Nick Bosa I think shows up to Kittle's birthday, and he's like, "Dude, I did not expect that. Like, you don't get that guy out of the house." Like,
I wonder if they'll ever play together. That'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
So, anyways, with regards to kind of where I think we're going to probably land, I think it'll probably end up being inverted to your last two on the in the division there, Jack. I think the Broncos will likely end up at third and the Chargers will be fourth. I could definitely see the Raiders finishing second in the division, given how well they've competed with the division rivals thus far. I think the big question, though, for the Raiders isn't necessarily the division itself. I think the bigger question for the Raiders is, how do you do against non-divisional opponents with the roster make right now? Because I think that'll be the deciding factor for the Raiders and whether or not they end up in second or third.
I think that's for all the teams. In reality, it's like, we talked about this on other shows. We're playing against the AFC North, and that's going to be a super tough division. I mean, the worst rated team was Cleveland, and they were 8-9.
Yeah.
So that's going to be
with a backup QB, with a backup quarterback.
Yes, yeah.
That they signed off the street.
So I mean, that's going to be the tall and tail. It's like a lot of times we're going to split. All our teams are going to split pretty much, Except, sorry, Richie, probably not going to split with the Broncos. It's probably going to be 10 straight. But I think
Actually, I
there
see
could
the
be
Raiders and
splits.
Broncos splitting this year.
We'll see. I just had to rub it in a little bit.
I'm sure you did.
But that AFC North is going to be a beast. So
Oh yeah,
it's really going to be like what we do against them. If the teams really, let's say we all split, right? It's going to be what we do against those teams is really going to dictate what the season's going to be for any of our teams. Alex, I got to say, you got to pass, dude.
Yeah.
2-time Super Bowl championship. Yeah, I think you're going to do all right there.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs have the best chance with the guys they have on their roster to give the AFC North a few fits. The only thing that I think will be a challenge, though, is it's the, I don't know how else to put it, the composition of the AFC North teams. Like they're built grittier for that colder weather, and so we're all kind of in that middle range where we're like half and half. Like we're kind of built partially for colder weather and partially for warmer weather passing, generally speaking, within the division. However, the AFC North is just built for that kind of grinded out brawl style football, generally speaking. And so you end up with bullies on the defensive line a lot of the time. They're just like dudes that came out of the womb and said, throw me a 20-pound barbell. I need to start doing 10 reps. Like that.
They just came out curling.
Yeah, exactly.
Weights on hand.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, 1, 2.
Grew up like Todd Marinovich too, right?
Yeah.
Dad's stretching them out.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying is I think they're just built a little different. Their rosters are built a little different. I think that they are there's certainly going to be some things that will give each of our teams some fits. I think that the Chiefs D-line is built for pass rush, which is also what the Steelers roster is generally built for on the defensive side as well. And so I think that's something to kind of consider as well. The Ravens have a similarly built roster where they're kind of defensive too. Although their offense is really the one that's
Talk about Marinovich.
Oh,
I think he gets high with art now.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's hiding out naked in bushes and
cool.
some random person's house.
Nice. So either way, I do think that the other divisional opponents or non-divisional opponents will be the ones that really decide kind of where we land. But I think within the division, I think the Chargers will probably win 2 probably of their division games, and I think they'll probably lose the rest. Although if Harbaugh is able to get that roster and believes that roster fits what he wants to do, then they could be that dark horse within the division where there isn't that first year lull that often happens with new head coaches where they're trying to like retool or rebuild the roster, as we just said earlier. And they could really come out swinging, and they could even take on, they could certainly take on the Chiefs. They could certainly take on the Raiders and the Broncos, and they could really kill it.
Hey, Pena, 75%, bro. Started off at 99%.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I'm glad you've actually had power all day. That's a rarity in California.
Oh no, I don't live in Southern California. I live in Northern California.
Oh, okay. That's better.
We have smut up here. We don't have PG&E.
Too much power.
Okay. Awesome. So my prediction would be effectively it'd be KC, Raiders, Broncos, and Chargers in that order for the division. I have reasons for it. I think that the Chargers are going to be kind of figuring out who and how they want to be and all that kind of stuff. And I think that there's going to be ebbs and flows, too many of them actually with the Chargers for them to kind of overcome. And I think you're going to have more changes on the roster. And I think that once those changes occur, There is a vision on the team now, which I think is different from what Staley had. I don't think he had a tremendous or solid vision at all. And I think that that's going to be a big difference. And so for the division, I think looking ahead to not 2024, but 2025, I think is going to be where the Chargers are going to really, I think they're going to be legitimately dangerous within the division to kind of leapfrog right up to the top of the heap and pile there and maybe even win the division if they draft well.
And Richie, I kind of see that with your team too. You'll finally get a full draft. Salary cap is going to be open up for you, so you can sign free agents. I think this year it's a little tough with all the Russell Wilson, contract and giving up all those draft picks for getting your head coach and getting Russell Wilson. So I kind of see the same thing for your team because you're going to have a full load of draft picks for the first time. So I see a lot of improvement with your squad as well.
I think we will, but I think that a lot of people are under evaluating some of the guys and how they fit our current scheme and what our coach wants to do. I just think there's a lot of guys, they are not household names. They are not your big free agent acquisitions. And yes, I actually agree with most people's assessment that the Broncos have a good wide receiver room, but they are not, they don't have Devontae Adams. I can tell you that much right now. And they don't have those elite level players. And our quarterback is quarterback of the future, at least, is a rookie who I hope we don't start this year. And I hope he just kind of learns and kind of gets better. So I think I do agree with you that I think the best is yet to come from the Broncos, but I do think that there is a propensity for most to look at the Broncos and what we've done this offseason and this year and think that we are intentionally punting, no pun intended, but intentionally punting the season to say, wait for us in 2025. And I actually think in 2024, the Broncos are going to be far more competitive than people think. So that's just my general comment. Alex, I'm sure this makes your job in life much easier because you don't have to disagree with any of us because we've had your team winning the division across the board.
Look at that smile, dude. Oh,
yeah.
Hey, I still remember a time when that would have been a joke to say the Chiefs are going to win the West. So, we had Matt Castle and Tyler Thigpen, all these other who guys, playing pivotal roles. So yeah, it's definitely a pretty sweet time to be a Chiefs fan, and it's kind of every offseason. I'm always just like, it just seems like they continuously are able to retool and not miss a beat despite doing things that might hinder other franchises, like moving on from your cornerstone receiver or having a whole lot of rookies having to contribute and it pan out on defense. So, a lot of stuff has certainly gone right, in things, especially these last couple of years. And they've won the past 2 Super Bowls and have essentially, I think, been in the Super Bowl almost every year, but really one since Mahomes has played, 2 since Mahomes has started. So, I think at this stage, it's pretty hard to count the Chiefs out until someone knocks them out. Yep. Are they don't win the West or don't make the playoffs, which, is hard to say that'll happen as long as Mahomes and Andy Reid are paired together and they're blessed with the health they've had so far, as they've kind of gone on this run. But yeah, I don't think the Chiefs really missed a beat. Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Biggie. That is certainly part of a championship season is, being lucky and fortunate enough to not really have, a whole lot of off-field distractions or injuries or the things of the like that take away from the attention of the field. One thing's for definitely sure, if something bad ever happened to Mahomes, that season's done. You're moving on to the next season. You're like, what do we? All right, we'll put Carson Wentz out here. He'll throw 40 interceptions, and we'll just figure out what we need to do for next year. But but yeah, as far as this season goes, like I mean, I don't see how they really missed anything. Like they brought everyone back on defense and only added to it with exciting rookies. Everyone's talked about the speed they've got, adding Worthy and going and getting Hollywood Brown. I think the biggest question will be, who's the left tackle? And, is that choice or whoever wins this preseason battle, going to be the answer throughout the year? But at the same time, I mean, they won last year with their receiving core leading the league in drop passes and their right tackle being the most penalized offensive lineman in the league. And their left tackle, I think, was consistently the lowest graded PFF left tackle every week. So, I mean, if they're close to that level of play or just a little better, I mean, it's tough. And if receivers, catch balls, it's tough to see them having a worse record than they did last year or doing anything worse. I mean, I think at some point you're going to get to like just so much pressure of, this whole season they're going to talk about no one's three-peated, like, can you do it? And the first time that something bad happens, you're going to see, you're going to know how they handle that. And we certainly saw this last year, Mahomes have issues with some, pressure moments and losing his cool. And that might be going into what he talked about of not having fun. I don't really know, but
Well, I'm sure he probably wouldn't have fun. He's throwing good balls. Being being the GOAT, and all the guys are dropping it.
I mean, I think it's
right in your hands.
2 games for sure. Detroit Lions game. If Tony just catches one ball, they probably win that because 2 of his drops basically led to 14 points. One was a pick 6, and one was right there. I think led to a fumble. I think he fumbled, and then Valdez-Scantling dropped a wide open touchdown to beat the Eagles. So I mean, those are 2 games right there that if the receivers just caught the ball, I mean, you probably likely 2 more wins to their record. So a lot to be excited about for this season, and I agree with all you guys that I think KC wins the West again and is.
I don't think you'd be having fun though with those scenarios either, though.
No, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I understand why he was frustrated, and he's also he's a leader through and through. So it's not like he was ever going to go to the media and bash his players. I'm sure I bet internally he wanted to, and he might have done that privately, but you can only take so much of that, and then also having to turn around after the game and be asked only about that because that was basically the reason you lost. And I understand why we saw some uncharacteristic things out of Mahomes, but at the end of the day, he is a leader. Like for sure, he turned the franchise around. Like he is a franchise cornerstone piece, and he consistently does everything right, and I think goes about everything the right way, and has kind of modeled how he wants to do his career after I think the right people. So yeah, exciting time for a Chiefs fan. Like I don't see him taking any sort of step back. It's hard, hard to say they're going to. I know Bishop comes in here all the time. I think the last 3 years now, Bishop said KC's going to fall off. But and like I said, till it happens, tough to say it will.
Absolutely, Bishop. Hey, dude, salute. Yeah, I agree. We all want it to happen, but until it happens, it's got to happen.
Yeah.
You lose guys. You lose your wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, and he's probably he's like a probably top 2 wide receiver besides Jefferson. And then you just lost Snead, and you keep putting your team back in the Super Bowl every year. It's like you're losing impressive players and you're replacing them. So your ownership, your management, everything from the top up going down is looking good. So I hope my Raiders team can resemble something like that.
And I will say, I think this next offseason will be a very interesting one because this, I think, is going to be the first wave of the first Veach post Mahomes draft class all coming up for, the next contract. And I mean, you're talking about Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, Nick Bolton. Those are certainly the three biggest ones. And so it'll be interesting because I think they're going to be in a little bit more of a bind of
Right.
who do we get rid of, who do we move on from. And so, we'll see how this season goes. But yeah, I mean, I think Chiefs are one, get their, I think, 9th consecutive AFC West title. I tend to agree with, both of you guys. I think the Raiders do finish second. And basically my reasoning behind that is, they have a hell of a defense. That's undeniable. They had a hell of a defense last year. They did add to that in a very big way with Wilkins. And, I know a lot of people, I think I knocked on him, that he got 100, whatever he got, 100 million. And I don't think he's had a double sack season yet, but also hasn't been paired with someone like Max Crosby, to take the attention away. And, so I think, for what they were wanting to do and, give AP, build the defense still, but kind of figure out what they have on offense. And just where the other two, the Broncos and Chargers, are at, I think the Raiders are kind of at this point looking at the season ahead, the more put together team of the three. And, I know I've said this before too. I think every team kind of has a unknown component to them, but I think their unknown component is, the least. And that's just how AP will do it the full season. But we saw what he did with half the season. And there's no denying he turned things around. And I mean, just like I know I've talked about this receiver show a few times, but you can tell from watching that, I mean, just how Devontae acted about it. And I mean, he was pretty vocal in his sections of the show that that's who he wanted. That's the guy. Yeah, I'll answer that, Ed, in a second. But yeah, I just think that he's got all the pieces in place to be successful. And they're going to see how successful they are this year, and then I think go for the quarterback of the future next year. But I think they're the more put together one and ultimately finish second. And then kind of similar to your approach, Richie, I kind of view the Broncos and Chargers the same. Like, I think it's a toss up for 3 and 4. And that's just mainly because, I think they're both essentially in a retooling, to some degree of, like, Broncos have their coach. They know, what they want to do. They just don't, I think, are not totally sure if all the answers have been questioned of, do they have the guys to do what Peyton wants? Especially, a quarterback. And that's just, because you got to see who they go with. Is it Nick's ready enough to play, or is it Stidham and you're developing Nick's, which, ideally, if that's the approach you're taking, I don't think you want to finish pretty high in the division, because you would, at that approach, like, you're not going forward with Stidham, Nick's is your guy. So why not try to get the highest draft pick you can to add to that, core moving forward. But, it's tough to say if Chargers or Broncos would finish third, because, I think Chargers could be really good if Harbaugh comes in and things catch a fire and, he turns Herbert around and everyone kind of gets on the same page. Because, like I said, he's done that before. I just think they have a little bit more holes on defense than you would like, going into that situation, and a lot, and the receiver room as well.
Oh yeah.
So, it both are in I think a lot of unknowns, and I think how this preseason progresses will give us more of a telltale sign of, like, which one's going to be the better team. But, I think it's a toss up, and I guess just if I had to put a number on it, I'll say Chargers finish third, Broncos fourth. But that kind of is from the mindset of, like, if I'm a Broncos fan and we're not starting Bo Nix, who we spent a top 15 pick on, I would want the highest pick I could possibly have in the next round, just to, like, pair whatever, and know that going into next season, I have my, new rookie QB who's done nothing but learn for a year, on top of, someone in the top 10 of college football players from this, last season. So, that's just that's kind of how I view things going into as we get into preseason. As I said, I think there's just more unknowns with the Chargers and the Broncos, and how those things will progress. We'll certainly see as we get into preseason games and see what kind of moves happen if they move Sutton or think they're in a better position and be more aggressive and bring someone in. But yeah, I mean, we'll just see. I do think it's an exciting year, and I agree with you as well that I think 2025 will kind of be what we talked about when I first came on the show of like the AFC West is going to be a gauntlet, and that really anyone can win it because that what was that off 2022 or 2021 off season when Chargers went and got Mac. It was like everyone was like trying to get these infinity stones very clearly like we're going to take down the Chiefs. And that was kind of the hype around the whole offseason was like, man, the AFC West is going to be wild. And it kind of didn't turn out that way. But I think 2025 is that's going to, I think all the cards are, everyone's getting the hands they want, and it'll be time to play some ball.
Do you want to quickly answer Ed's question? And I'm going to respond to a couple of the Broncos stuff there. There's a couple things in the chat and also what you said there.
Yeah, so it's tough. I wanted to get through my whole thoughts on ranking 1 through 4 before I did that because I would get off of something. But I mean, I think it's kind of tough to compare the two because I mean, Chris Jones is I think more of a complete defensive lineman, and I just say that from the aspect of he can play interior and plays it at an elite level. It is a force in the run game and is a force in the pass game. I mean, that's not to say Max Crosby isn't either, but he's also not an interior D lineman. So, it's a little bit of a different play type and what you're going against. I mean, that being said, I think that Chris Jones right now is a better pass rusher than Crosby just because, I mean, he has the stats to prove it and he hasn't really regressed. I mean, but he's also farther along in his career. I think Crosby at the end of his road will probably have better stats than Chris Jones does. But I mean, I think Chris Jones right now, given Aaron Donald's, taken over the throne, so to speak, of like most feared pass rusher in the league right now. And that's just because he does it from all levels and, all angles, and they strategically move him around. And like, I mean, you saw it in the Super Bowl, even if he's not in the QB's face, he certainly can impact the play, like, I mean, that fourth down or third down that the 49ers definitely needed to, convert on, Chris Jones, I think just kind of jumped up in Purdy's view and he freaked out and grossly underthrew the receiver. He didn't even like get close to hitting him. But I mean, that I think goes to show you how feared he is and how much, if he's got an opportunity, opposing offenses kind of freak out. But I mean, the same could be said with Max Crosby. I think the difference is Max Crosby is way more of a hustle player, and he makes a lot of plays from the fact that he'll chase people down, from opposite side of the field, or just not give up on a rush. And, and coverage is great, and he, gets in there and gets the sack. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I view the two. That being said, they're two totally different types of, edge rush players.
Absolutely. It's like you got one that's a DT and one's a DN. It's like it's hard to compare. It's like, the quickest line to the quarterback is your DT. So
yeah.
And you can get that disruption up the middle. I mean, we look at like, Tom Brady. When you had, defensive ends coming at him, he would just kind of step up in the pocket. But if you can't step up in the pocket, that just changes everything for guys like that. Even the greatest ones. So, it's super difficult. I would never compare the two just for the fact that they play different positions. So it's like.
Yeah. And I think it'll be interesting too, to see, the Chiefs have invested a little, both free agency wise and early draft picks in edge rush players. And so, Felix and DK Uzoma was pick 32 last year and barely saw the field. And I don't know if that was oh crap, we drafted a bust or this guy just needs to be developed, because that was kind of the thing with him, coming out of college, that he, was a raw player that put up numbers in the Big 12. That's like everyone can on defense in that conference. And just that he would need some more fine tuning. But if he comes around and turns into productive edge piece, as well as a Minihue coming back from his ACL to the same level he was playing, you might arguably have enough pieces that you don't even need to be putting Chris Jones out on the edge as much as they do. And so, that could bring a whole different component to kind of like you were talking about, Jack. Like he could be almost exclusively inside rushing, and that might, bring a whole different game to how they go about, defending opposing offenses.
Yeah, but that's kind of cool that he's versatile enough to where you can put a guy like that who is so big, so strong, so powerful, and he can go up on the edge versus like you have to stunt. With Max, you're going to stunt from the outside going to the inside. And then let's see if the guards or the centers, if they can handle his hands. Because you're doing that from movement versus just strength.
Yeah. And with Crosby too, we don't know that, what the Wilkins addition will do to his game. You could have teams that would have to give Wilkins a little more, praise and attention just because he's inside and is at least known to be a, respectable force there that could in turn open up things for Crosby too. So it'll be exciting, I think, as a Raiders fan to see how this season goes with the two of them paired together.
That's what I'm looking forward to.
And
almost
Tyree Wilson too. If Tyree Wilson comes around, it's almost
Did you see the picture of that guy? Did you see the picture of Tyree? He looks bigger than John Jenkins, who at like 6'2", 330, 340 as nose tackle. He looks bigger. I was like, oh my God. I was trying to look for a picture to send to Richie, when we go over running backs in Zamir White. And that's another dude. It's like between, Tyree and Zamir, how yoked they looked. I'm like, wow, these are like bodybuilders, not football players. So yeah, I agree. Tyree, it's going to be interesting what they do with him, because they said he's going to go and play on the outside. But then you have Kuntz out there, and he got 8 sacks last year, and most of that came in the second half. So it's going to be interesting. NASCAR is going to be a blessing on my team. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do on the outside.
I agree.
So you guys want to go through some player positions?
Yeah, well, I think when you look at kind of what Alex was saying, with just back to what he was saying earlier when he was kind of breaking things down, I think when you look at some of the position groups with Denver, I think, and by the way, I think while we're talking about the Broncos briefly here, it's no surprise I'm a huge fan of Quinn Miners. I've mentioned him several times on the show. He got
his stacks, baby.
He's got his stacks given his way.
80 mil of them.
80 mil over a period of time there. That's good for him. Frankly, well deserved, because he actually earned it. He had to climb his. He had to
D3 player.
Yeah,
that's a cool story. Like,
yeah,
they don't even give scholarships to play D3 football.
No.
and parlay that into 84 million, whatever it was.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So I actually think that Miners is kind of one of those guys that, if you're not in Denver, you really didn't see him coming. I saw some of his play, and there's a reason why he was drafted by the front office. He really was that good. And he was for those of you who don't remember, he kind of showed out in the one of the bowls where he just absolutely just destroyed some of the top linemen in terms of in their one-on-ones. And so good for him. Yeah.
Oh.
And
it was Senior Bowl. Okay.
Yeah, Senior Bowl. Yeah.
No, I remember when they drafted him because I mean, I'm familiar with that school, and like, if you're playing D3 football, you want to be at a Wisconsin school. Like those ones are the powerhouses. I mean, there's actually been a good chunk of NFL players that have come from Wisconsin D3 schools. It's because the unique thing is, like, I had a buddy that went to one of them, and I was like, "Why are they all so good?" He's like, "It's because Wisconsin, like, the people there only want to play for the Badgers, and if they don't get an offer from the Badgers, they just go to Whitewater or whatever Mount Union, like all of those." He's like, "So all of these ones are like dudes that were like 3-4-star recruits, but they only wanted to play for Wisconsin." It's like, damn. But yeah, I remember when they drafted him, I watched some of his tape, and I was like, yeah, this dude's gonna be good. You could just see it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just like how he went about it, like he was just a mauler and didn't stop. So like, yeah, those guys, if they can get to the next level and continue that pace of play, like you're gonna be successful as an offensive lineman.
He was kind of what Moody was, except he has arms that are long enough in order to keep the defender at bay.
Yeah.
Because that was really what Netani Moody's issue was. Now he went to the Raiders, if I'm not mistaken, for a number of years after he was with Denver. He's a mauler too. Moody was. He's a massive strong guy. Moody was, but his arms were quite short. He had T-Rex arms, and the problem is that
that's why he could bench so much.
He could bench like he could bench some like ridiculous amount of weight. It was like just crazy. But the problem is that his arms weren't long enough to start that and keep that initial hand fight, so that he wasn't getting overtaken. And Miners has kind of got the best of both worlds, where he's got proportions that are correct for the position group and puts him in a better position to win. And he's got the technique and drive to come into the league and elevate himself year over year. And that's also the other thing that's been understated with Miners, is every year he has identified a problem and fixed it. Every year I have this issue, it's corrected now. I have this issue, it's corrected now. I have this, it's corrected. And he's laddered himself up every year he's been in the league. And I think that's something that I don't hear enough Broncos fans say, and I certainly don't hear enough of the analysts say about Quinn Miners. They just say he's great. It's like, well, really, why? Like why? Like why is he great? Like what?
It's because it's mostly a defensive back or quarterback, being the analysts, and they don't know what to talk about with the offensive line. It's like, oh yeah, he's good. He's always in front of someone.
It's like, why exactly is he so good? It was like, well, one of the things that he wasn't good at was pass pro, and he worked on it in the offseason. He got really good at it. He like
trains punching trees. I mean, how can you not get behind something like that?
Exactly.
Trains like Rocky in Rocky 4.
He trains up here in Ontario, actually, in the northwest Ontario.
just out in the cold, just screaming, "Mobs!"
Yeah. So that's exactly what you want from a lineman. You want a guy that recognizes and ladders himself up every year, and that's why he got what he got, and deservedly so. I just hope he continues to do what he was doing, and he doesn't kind of say, okay, now I got what I needed. I would love to see him continue to be that lifelong Bronco on the offensive line and continue to earn that re-up contract. Yeah, what I would love to see it, because he's a guy that I'd love to see stick around. But
Biggie is kind of right, though. With offensive linemen, like usually the ones that people are talking about, it's because they're effing ups. That's usually the thing,
No, but the thing is what was happening on these shows. It was like on NFL Network and some of these other places like FS1 and these other places, like Quinn Miners has had a real great season last year, and it's like, and I'm listening. I was like, and
how?
Why?
Why?
And then just kind of leave it at that, as if like it's some like profound thing that they have said that is should like echo through the halls of all NFL fans, that they just kind of say, yes, that's great. And it's like, the reason why people want to watch you is because they expect more than just some random thought that spews out of your face. Like they're looking to you to kind of actually give them some information so they can kind of take it back and be like, oh, I never that's something that I wouldn't have seen because, I don't have 5 hours to watch film like you do and stuff, right?
Well, now
And
you're asking too much of the national media, Richie.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
silly me.
Yeah.
Silly
Yeah,
me.
no one's got time
I
for
think
that.
they usually take the approach now of like, okay, this guy's good, but we can't say that because we won't get views. So let's say he's bad. All right, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
All the
2 hours
clickbait.
of that. Go.
Hey, Richie, I got a question for you. Since I'm a big Notre Dame guy, there's a lot of offensive linemen. Like we just had one picked up by the Chargers, pick number 5 overall in Alt. You got McClenskey, and I think it's what, $82 to $85 million. I mean, in my Notre Dame world, and I love my Notre Dame players, and when we talk about running backs, I'm going to talk about yours too. But so what do you think of McClenskey, being on the right side? Because if I had to pick my Notre Dame team, I'd have Alt on my left and McClenskey on my right. And I know the Raiders wanted to draft him at number 9, and they lost that coin flip with the Niners. So they got number 10, and they traded back 5 spots with the Cardinals to pick up an extra 3rd, and that's when they got Miller. So how are you feeling about McClenskey so far?
Are you expecting good things?
Oh, I just wanted to know what your thoughts were. I really haven't watched him since college. So
he's not good.
No, it's not good. So I was originally hopeful that the outside zone style, kind of generally speaking, would transition well for him, and he'd kind of have some kind of. It doesn't work.
It's power.
No, but he doesn't even do power well anymore, and that's the problem. He was getting beat, and I mean beat badly. So McGlinchey in pass pro was struggling to
never good.
Adapt. He couldn't adapt. He wasn't able to adjust. He was good in the run game in terms of run block and stuff like that, generally speaking, except even that, as the year went on, started getting worse. My honest opinion of McGlinchey is I think in the younger years in his career, I think he was probably a very good lineman and likely did fairly well. And I believe his stats bear that out as well. However, I think the problem that McGlinchey has is that, like so many gifted athletes, and make no mistake, he is a gifted and was definitely a very gifted athlete. Some of them take their athleticism for granted.
Yeah, absolutely.
In what way?
Well,
just being athletic and not improving on your game mentally and.
No, it has nothing to do with the mental aspect, actually. It's all the physical component. So the problem is I think too many of these athletes believe, because they've been correct actually in that belief throughout the entirety of their career thus far, even up until and including college, that they are just so much better athletically and so much more gifted athletically than their counterparts on other teams and opposing players on other rosters, that necessarily need to elevate themselves and push themselves and do the extra things that they would otherwise need to do in order to keep themselves both healthy and improve themselves enough to be that good. And I think what the issue that so many of these gifted athletes, when they come to the NFL, is they don't realize that the NFL is the best of the best across, say, the last 8 years of not just college football, but also international and any other random nook and cranny that an NFL team can pull some dude from who is just that damn good at football.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's the problem. Yeah. Like, hey, we went to some random place in some random thing and found some town where they like to breed bodybuilders, and we found this one guy that could bench 900 pounds, and he's going to make a great lineman.
We found a village in Haiti. It was nothing but weights, and everyone was 6'8", 330.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that's kind of what I mean, right? Is that too many of these dudes come out of college and they've got, ego might be the wrong word, but they certainly have an inflated sense of self because they've been
already have it figured out.
Yeah, they think they already know, right? And little do they know that they've got much learning still to do, and the NFL is a much, much, much harder place to play than their college years. My understanding from what I can gather from McGlinchey and what I've seen from him is that I don't believe he did as much as he probably should have done to maintain his body in the earlier stages of his career. And I believe he's now paying for it in the latter and end of his career, where my best take, what I saw from him on the field for my Denver Broncos, was he was too fatigued. His body couldn't make it through the entire season because it was falling apart.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Do you think he can come back? Kind of like Bowles. Bowles was like kind of the same type of player in the beginning, but he turned his career around. He's looking a lot stouter now.
No, he didn't.
He's still not? I thought he's playing better now.
Dude, you and I are not watching the same film.
I only watch your games twice a year.
Right. So glasses are good, and I'm sure they have optometrists there in California. That's a very, very important thing. The issue. There you go. Perfect. All right. And now you'll know.
He said you were saying.
Yes. Yeah. So the thing with Bowles, and this is what just really makes me upset, is people don't recognize the rule changes in the NFL. So what took place in the NFL was that the rules changed dramatically in about we'll call it COVID. So like 2020, right around the 2020 season. And the refs stopped calling holding penalties on left tackles. One of the reasons for that is that a lot of the left tackles were just getting absolutely eaten alive by the likes of guys like TJ Watt and about 3 or 4
Myles
Garrett and these other dudes that were just mauling them, like literally mauling them. And what was ended up happening was it basically made the game so that it was like a cheat code, is that you had these defenders that basically were winning that battle every time, and it was making the offense not look as good as it could have been. And then what the refs and the league started doing was they started basically kind of nudge, nudge, wink, wink, don't worry about it, stopped calling offensive holds. However, if you truly look at the film itself, Garrett is still holding guys like he was the year prior in 2019 when he was one of the most penalized offensive linemen in the league. The only difference is he's now just not getting called for those same holds.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I watch every game. I see like an extra 3 or 4 holds on max. So,
right,
yeah.
So that's my point. It's I don't believe, and the issue here is you either level yourself up as Quinn Miners has done and actually learn the proper technique and the right way of doing some of those things. In fairness, Garrett has improved in several aspects of his game, but not the important ones. He hasn't improved hand placement. He hasn't improved as he carries his gait, as he's kind of trying to block out guys. He often overextends left or overextends right, inside and out, and with his shoulders and squaring up, and or bend is either too high or too low. And you see him then having to make quick and fast recoveries. And the way that you do that is either you adjust your body properly and then you actually get proper and low and then use physical strength, or you do what Garrett does and he'll just grab onto whatever he can on the opponent to slow him down, to give him the time to readjust. And it's those holds that he used to get called for in 2019. And then 2020 and 2021 and 2022, actually 2020 and 2021, they stopped calling it. 2022, they started calling it again, and he had a whack ton of penalties there in 2022. And in 2023, they kind of realized that the game was less watchable, and they stopped calling it again in 2023.
Yeah. So did Richie just call his own team probably the worst offensive line in the AFC West then?
I have long said.
Yeah, I don't think he disagrees with that.
I have long said that both tackles on my team need to be replaced with ball, like the real deal football players.
Yeah. And I think the thing with McGlinchey is a good run blocker. But he got paid like he's an all around right tackle, which he's not. And
what, $85 million?
Yeah. something.
Dude,
like
I never
that.
said I was a fan of the initial acquisition. I was hoping he'd transition well. And then as soon as I saw the preseason, I said one of the worst trades and one of the worst acquisitions we made. And I was very clear.
But I think what was not taken into consideration is, I mean, I think he got paid one just because of how the market. I think he was like the best available tackle at the time, and he was the top 10 pick. I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
But I think the thing that wasn't considered is that he came out of a Shanahan offense, which is like predominantly works off of the run and does a lot of like play action and short screens and things like that. They don't necessarily do a whole bunch of like 5-step deep concepts where the tackle's got to, basically on an island and be a dancing bear for 3 to 4 seconds. And, then he goes to, Denver with Peyton, who certainly as, I mean, anyone who has watched Saints or is a Peyton offense knows, I mean, he's more of a spread things out and, be a little more creative with passing and just a different type of play style, that I don't think McGlinchey necessarily would have ever fit into. And it was just more of the timing of Broncos certainly had a need, had some money. And I think also kind of had to, take the step to say, okay, like we know, because did they sign him the year after they brought Russ in? Like this last
year
season
before.
was first, yeah. So, I think that it was like I said, he was just kind of a victim of, he was best available. He had the pedigree, so to speak, and that he was a top drafted pick and started on an NFL team that was pretty good. And, I think the Broncos had to kind of take the proverbial next step, so to speak, and commit and say, okay, we got to use this season to really know if Russ can turn things around, if we get him more help or not. And so that's why you saw him give them the money they did. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's the majority of Broncos country probably feels the same way as Richie about McGlinchey. And, just from all the Broncos guys I follow on Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter, they all seem to want to trade Garrett Bowles for about anything. So I think they feel the same about him too.
Well, if you also look at Trent Williams, when he got that like $132 million contract, and then McGlinchey's coming up, you can't afford to pay him. Kind of like right now, the Niners can't afford to pay Ayuk, their wide receiver. That's what happens. Like when you guys go to the Super Bowls and stuff, you can't afford to pay all these people. And so, he's coming off that good offensive line, and I can see the Broncos wanting to snatch him up. I liked him, as a Notre Dame player.
I mean, yeah, I think he was definitely.
He was the number one offensive lineman drafted, number 10 that year.
Tackle in college, but like as Richie kind of said, I mean, the NFL is.
It's a different beast.
Yeah, like it you can kind of hide some stuff in college with how offenses work. Way more than you can hide in the NFL because, for as bad as someone is at a skill set, the person across from them is elite at the opposite, end of it. So, yeah, it's harder to, hide a weakness.
Let's put it this way, Jack. The worst edge rusher that McGlinchey has gone against in the NFL would be the top edge rusher likely in college.
Ooh, that's really bad. Well, I hope he steps up for you guys, unless he's playing the Raiders.
No. But my point is that at the NFL level, the competition.
No, I get it.
Iron Sharp is just so much better. Like it is so much better. And on top of that, if you don't do the right things to keep your body right, to allow yourself to last into the latter part of your career, you're done. You're done. Like, how many Raiders guys have you seen your team cut? And you're like, he had so much promise, but he just didn't do what he was supposed to do or needed to do to keep himself healthy and on the field. Like,
absolutely. After getting John Gruden, getting 3 first-round draft picks, and the only one that back was Josh Jacobs.
That is not me knocking your team either, because I have the same comment about my Broncos players too. There's a ton of those guys as well.
I will say though, Biggie is certainly not wrong, and I would agree with. I think part of it too in how bad the offensive line looked was just how. I guess, inept Russell Wilson was at making the right decision quickly. And I think that is a huge, factor to running a Sean Payton offense. I mean, that's all they ever talked about with Drew Brees is like how efficient he was at getting the ball out in like 1 second. So, I mean, if that's like kind of what I was getting at with the unknowns. I mean, if Bo Nix or Stidham or I mean, hell, even Zach Wilson, if one of them can buy in and run Peyton's offense the way he wants to run it, I think that might help the offensive line. And then, you might see better seasons out of Bowles and McGlinchey because, they're running it at more a quick and efficient way like Peyton wants to compared to how Russ was trying, going out there trying to do it.
I don't disagree that that's correct. I think that holding onto the ball and not following the playbook and not being able to read the defense properly, adjust protections appropriately. These are all things that are like, yes, Russ did that wrong. Yes, Russ did that wrong. Yes, Russ did that wrong. I agree 100%. However, it was such a glaring gap between A and B with McGlinchey. Like it was,
got to call a spade a spade.
Yeah. Like I'm sorry. Like at some point you just got to stop trying to, not hurt someone's feelings. Yeah. Like just stop it. Like, the dude's run blocking was quite good. The dude's pass pro was atrocious, like atrocious.
Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit.
Yeah. And the way that I looked at it is, I think he was trying to set, and Jack, you kind of alluded to this. He was trying to set in the passing game with power to anchor himself to, really lock a dude down. You can't do that in the pass pro. You almost have to kind of play the shove and push game a little bit, or you got to get right under in the proper spot.
Especially on the edge. On the edge, you got to disrupt the first move.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how you buy time. And
what we were seeing from McGlinchey is that he was almost, I wouldn't say he was overextending, but he was trying to do that initial power block move that you kind of end up with when you're trying to do a run block down and continue downfield, which, by the way, he was quite good at. Right. So like, I don't want to necessarily completely slam him too badly, but then he was also hurt a couple times. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying, is that I don't think he did all of the right things early in his career to keep his body to a point where he could continue into a very difficult sport, which requires you to be healthy for 18 weeks. And make no mistake, the NFL is no joke. It will absolutely slaughter your body regardless of how elite of an athlete you are. And that is why you end up with some of these really top tier players spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on their bodies to make sure that they can keep playing and earn a contract just as he got in this. The problem is that he's still getting all that money, and he no longer needs to put that extra money in because he's earned it now. Like it's so much of it's guaranteed.
Well, I don't know the contract. What is the contract?
I have it here in front of me. Here you go. So, so he was signed in 2023, which was Russ's second year.
Yeah, that's when they signed Powers too, right?
They signed Powers the same year. And his dead cap, 46 mil if they cut him this year, 39 mil if they cut him next year.
It was 5 years, 87.5.
Yeah.
Ouch. Oh, well, sorry.
Like I said, elite right tackle numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. He got paid as if he was in his prime effectively and coming up to that next deal.
Yeah.
And looking at his level of play, look, I know you like him and that's cool, but he
played a lot better for the Niners than he did for your Broncos. That's for sure.
He's not playing at that level.
Pretty much has to play for him these next 2 years because his dead cap, is like almost 47 million and then almost 40 mil, then drops to 15 after that. So
yeah,
he's gonna be there. Yeah,
he's gonna be there. Ouch.
26, right? Like you can walk away in 26. You can walk away in 2026. Now, he would be a good guy, I think, because he seems like he seems like a very high character person so far from what I've heard and how he's carried himself. I think he'd be an ideal guy similar to Alex Smith. I think if you drafted a right tackle, and as long as you included him in that decision-making process, keep him kind of, on as the development process continues with a rookie, I think that would be a smart move. I think you bring someone like that and you have him kind of work with somebody. I think that would be a smart way of going about it. But that would be 2025. So that'd be not this draft coming up. That would be like the draft maybe after. And you keep him on at that 15 mil salary. Or the other thing that I'm predicting this year is I think Alex Plazowski, he's a UDFA who really killed it in the preseason last year. I think he has an actual chance to potentially kind of come in from a physical standpoint. Remember, I'm not talking football IQ or experience or anything like that. It's about where they are now, not where they used to be. And I think he has a chance to potentially kind of earn some additional playing time based on how he played in preseason last year and what a lot of comments were coming out of training camp and everything else as well. So I think there's a lot of interesting depth with the Denver Broncos that a lot of other teams and other fans aren't aware of just because they don't follow the Broncos as closely. And I think that's part of the reason why the Broncos are kind of being seen as like a lock for fourth place in the division. And I think that, while it's possible, I think that it is unlikely. I think the Broncos have enough talent and a head coach that knows how to leverage that talent where they're probably going to end up being third. And if things go the right way and kind of coming out, you never know where they could land. But guys, it sounds like there is at least relative agreement, which is weird. But still relative agreement across the board here on the show, across the panel. We got Casey number one. I believe we all agreed that we think the Raiders are probably finishing second. And then really the only debate volleying ebb and flow back and forth seemed to be between the Chargers and the Broncos.
I wonder what Robert would say. Text it, Robert. Join in chat.
That's a good question. But I think that I think it's a fair comment to make. I think it's a fair comment. Wow.
Damn, I'm at 42%. Let's talk about the players. So I charged my phone for this show, dude. This is an exciting one. This is the fun stuff.
Yeah, so I think what we can do is go deeper into some of the positional players. Hoping we're going to have some other teams on where we can start talking about those guys specifically. So we'll hopefully do that next week, where we can go into the deeper positional group kind of breakdown and start looking at those other opponents. Because I actually think that that's where those positional players are going to make a huge difference for each of our teams. Like I think we largely agree that we all play each other pretty tough, and it wouldn't be a shock or surprise if we split games, for example, with the division, even though that hasn't been the way things have gone in recent years, but they've always been close games. So it's never so far beyond the pale where you'd be like, hey, I can't believe that one game we lost to the Broncos and then the next game we beat the Broncos, or hey, the Broncos beat the Chiefs this year. And it's like, well, I mean, Alex, for example, like we've spoken before, like even the years that we lost to the Chiefs, we held you guys in like 3 consecutive years to like less than 2 full scores, for example. Yeah. Like, so it would not have been a shock for you to be like, yes, I know we lost that one. Why? Because they held us to less than 2 scores. Like, it wouldn't have been a huge shock or surprise to you, for example, right? And that was during the Fangio regime, just as an example, right?
Yeah.
And so anyways, I think that our division is always going to play each other tough. I think we're always going to end up with, a field goal or a fumble touchdown or some kind of, basically whoever makes the fewest mistakes will end up winning the game. And or whoever has a player that turns out or shows out, differently than we might have thought against that particular team. I looked like Josh Jacobs, for example, who he didn't really come from, but he always seemed to play the divisional rivals much better than everyone else. And he killed the Broncos for sure. And he also didn't do that badly against the Chiefs either when he played them. So I think that when you have guys like that, that really makes a difference. But until next week, guys, we're gonna wind down the show for tonight. We're gonna go into a lot more detail next week as we kind of start doing some of the schedules and players and that kind of stuff, and go into some real depth there. Anyone else with any other questions, leave it down below in the chat, and we will see you next week with the West Side.
When we do position players, let's keep edge rushers at edge rushers. We all run different defenses, 4-3s. Raiders run a 4-2-5, 3-4s. Like, let's just keep it edge rushers versus edge rushers, outside linebackers, inside linebackers. Because I really had a really tough time, looking at linebackers and cornerbacks. I had a really tough time because then you're talking, do you count a slot, cornerback, or are you just talking about edge cornerbacks? So it was kind of difficult to not sure what we're going to want to do. But
you also get into the quasi corner safety where you get a DB who sometimes plays both positions depending on how you play defense as a team as well. But I think that's really what makes shows like this really interesting, is that we're not going to jump down your throat for saying, how dare you ask such a complex question like that we actually need to have a 5-minute discussion about. And I think that's why I think it makes more sense to give us a little bit more runway in those types of discussions, because I think it's the benefit for both us and the audience here that we have that discussion where we have more time to go over it. And until next week, ladies and gentlemen, where the West Side is the best side, this is the Wild Wild West Podcast. Peace!
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast's racking up the flight miles. So high, I might never come down, so what, this is my lifestyle. Wait a minute.